If you've ever sat with your child doing maths homework and thought, why is this so hard for them? Why won't it stick? Then this episode is about what's actually going on and why understanding it changes everything. Welcome to Safety in Numbers, a podcast for parents of children who struggle with maths, including those with dyscalculia or a specific learning difficulty in maths. In each episode, we explore what might be happening when maths feels difficult and what parents can do to better understand and support their child. Hello and welcome. I'm Alison Shaw. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this very first podcast. Why are you joining me though? Who am I and what can I offer you? Well, it's a really good question. I've been involved in education, maths education, all my career in a whole range of guises. I've been an author of books for teachers and curriculum materials and an education researcher. I'm currently a maths education consultant, and the one thing that brings me the most value in that role is being a specific learning difficulties assessor. That means that I investigate with children and young people what's going on for them when they find English and or maths more challenging than they would expect. I find it the most rewarding element of my work because being able to help just one individual by helping them to understand what's going on for them and importantly giving them a voice to explain that to others is why I'm in it. And while it's incredibly rewarding to see that the transformation is possible, what has increasingly frustrated me is that there's very little support for parents who find themselves in a position where their child is experiencing difficulties in maths. They've often spoken to school already. They've been told, perhaps by several teachers, just to wait a few years, or that their child will catch up, or that they will get it if they apply themselves or undertake extra homework. But those nagging doubts are still there. They may inquire about an assessment through school. School explains that they don't have the budget for that if the parent wants an assessment, they'll have to pay privately. Or a school may go ahead and give the child an online screener to complete, which returns a verdict of no concern. Now, not everyone wants or can afford a diagnostic assessment, but a Google search doesn't offer much help either. The information is often contradictory, out of date, or superficial. I've seen information from services that give a list of indicators, but the question remains, so what? You know what the problem is. That's why you're here, but you're just not sure how to respond to it. And that's where this podcast comes in. This podcast is for parents of children who are struggling with maths. It's designed to offer you some information and guidance on how you can support your child as they navigate their maths difficulties in school and life. Sometimes we'll focus on dyscalculia, sometimes on other aspects of the equally debilitating disability that's referred to as a specific learning difficulty in maths, which many people may not have heard of. Whether your child has a formal diagnosis or not, there'll be practical advice for you to follow. In season 1, I'm covering aspects such as why maths facts don't stick, what can happen when we talk about being bad at maths, what dyscalculia is, why place value can be confusing, why a child may use their fingers and what we might do about it, what feeling under pressure can do for someone already feeling overwhelmed, and what we might expect schools to do or be doing to support our child. We'll also sometimes focus on you, though. That's really important because it's difficult knowing that something is going on and you're not quite sure what to do. But sometimes it's just important to take stock, some time for yourself, and see how you are getting on. Now, in this first episode, I want to start at the beginning. Good place to start. It's the first episode. I'm not starting with labels and I'm not starting with diagnoses. I'm just starting with the question that you've probably been asking for quite some time now. Why is maths so hard for my child? I suspect you'll be surprised by the answer that I want to give you, though, because it's perhaps more complex than you thought. So, why is maths so hard for so many? The broad answer is that maths places heavy demands on the brain. But I want to unpick what that really means. So, let's start with what I mean by maths. I'm talking about real mathematical understanding. Okay, not just following a method or procedure to get an answer, but having a deep conceptual understanding of why that method works. The first thing I'd like us to consider is that numbers are generally abstract. They're an idea or a concept. Okay, I can hold 7 counters and count them and see that there are 7 counters, but 7 is more than just counting how many there are. I might be 7 years old. I might live at number 7. My mum's birthday might be on the 7th of July, the 7th month. I get up at 7 a.m. 7 is everywhere. It's abstract. And then as I get older, I see that a 7 in the tens place of a number is not 7 anymore. It has a value of 70. And if I meet a 7 in the fraction, say 7 quarters, I need to know that 7 quarters is equivalent to 1 whole and 3 quarters. Right, so where did that 7 even go? And sometimes 7 will be represented by a square or a letter, if it's a missing number. Now, I've gone off on one quite a bit, all right? I know. But my point is that numbers are abstract. They're a name for something that labels many, many things: elephants, dates, time. And the more progress we make through our school maths, the more abstract numbers become. And what underpins that true mathematical understanding I mentioned at the beginning is being able to process the magnitude or the size of those numbers and their relationships to each other. So, for example, knowing that 7 is bigger than 5, or that 7 is closer to 10 than it is to 0. Knowing that I can make 7 by adding 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 3 and 4. Knowing that 70 is 10 times greater than 7. Knowing that 7 is half of 14. Knowing that 7 6 times is 42. So that's the first thing that I want you to think about: understanding the magnitude, that is the size of number. The second thing is related to what happens when you have to hold one or more of these numbers in your mind. In school maths, you're rarely just holding a number there. You're being expected to do something with it. You might be adding something to it, multiplying it by something, taking that number and writing it in the next column. So that action of holding something in your head while doing something with it is referred to as working memory. And I'll talk more about that in a future episode. But for now, just know that having to remember a number and then doing something with it can be really demanding for some children. The third thing is that sometimes the thing we have to do with that number in our mind isn't automatic yet. So instead of being able to recall without effort that 7 times 6 equals 42, if I'm working through a long multiplication and I have to pause that already complicated routine to work out 7 times 6, then I may forget where in the routine I'm up to. It doesn't flow. I'm more likely to make mistakes. So I'm focused on getting to 42, and then I've forgotten where to put that 2 and that 4. The fourth thing is that we may have been absent when something was taught at school. Or we might have been there, but there was a distraction outside so that we didn't quite grasp what was being learnt. Maths is hierarchical. It builds on prior learning step by step. So if part of that is missing, and we try to use that missing part in a more complex way, we can't manage it. It's like trying to bake a cake when we don't have a critical ingredient. The dyscalculia network refers to this as the Jenga effect. We know what eventually happens to that tower when there are too many missing blocks further down. I'll put a link to their explanation in the notes. Next, we have to consider how our child is feeling. We're never all on our A game all of the time. And when all those things that I've mentioned already are overwhelming, what is an already full mind, this can be exhausting. I'll come back to this later in an episode about homework. But here I want to briefly mention anxiety. Not all children with maths difficulties have anxiety, but anxiety can build in children who find maths confusing or overwhelming over a long period of time. It's a very understandable response. And when anxiety is present, it actively interferes with your thinking. It can trigger avoidance strategies or make us shut down. In whichever case, it makes it much harder for children to show what they actually know. And so learning maths becomes a lower priority. Now, I'm going to sound like one of those teleshopping programs when I say, but wait, there's more. But there is. Because for some children, other differences in how they learn get in the way of how they learn. And sometimes parents are not aware of their child having these learning differences. For example, I recently diagnosed a child with dyslexia. He didn't come for me for a dyslexia assessment. Dyscalculia was his parents' main concern. But you see, dyslexia impacts sequencing, interpreting word problems, explaining reasoning. And you know what? He didn't have dyscalculia. He had dyslexia, and that was impacting on his maths. I once assessed a child who was later diagnosed with ADHD. He was always avoiding work. His teacher referred to him as the class clown. And his parent and teacher both thought that it was because he couldn't do the maths. But it wasn't that. His attentional difficulties meant that he'd often struggled to keep a sequence of steps in his mind long enough to complete a calculation. Dyspraxia is another, often underdiagnosed learning difference, where children may struggle with laying out their written work or sequencing their work. In each of these cases, maths feels hard, sometimes really hard, even though the maths itself isn't the primary difficulty. Finally, for now, I want us to consider the classroom environment. I don't know about you, but when I have to really concentrate, I have to do it in silence. Anything that distracts me in the slightest makes the task harder. Now, sometimes if I really need to concentrate, I can't even have people elsewhere in the house. Yeah, I know that's pretty extreme, but let's think about a child in a classroom where there are perhaps 29 other children, an adult or two. The lawn is being mown outside the classroom. There's a PE lesson going on in the hall next door. The smells of the school dinner are wafting through the window. The teacher is talking to another child. A pencil is dropping off someone's desk. Another child is sneezing, and so on. You can see how that environment may not be so conducive to holding a mathematical task in mind. Okay, I've lost track of how many things we need to do there when we're learning maths. I think maybe there were 7. There's that abstract number again. I hope you can see that all of this is really encouraging you to think about all of those things that our mind is managing when we think all we're doing is maths. And that's really scratching the surface. We'll explore further things in later episodes, but it does give you an indication as to why maths is so difficult. So now we know that there's a huge amount going on in a child's mind. That's exhausting. But let's not leave it there. Let's change tack. Let's think about the longer term impact that these difficulties may have on your child, and by natural extension, you and your relationship with each other. Let's think about maths homework. For many families I work with, homework is something that everyone dreads. Sometimes there are tears even before it starts. Perhaps sometimes these tears belong to your child, and maybe sometimes they're yours. You know you're the adult and that you're supposed to be making it better for your child. That's in the parent job description, right? But you may find yourself at a loss as to what to do. You find yourself walking on eggshells, trying not to make it worse. I want to pause here for a moment because we're talking about maths homework. In other spheres of life, your child is full of energy. They may love reading, have a vivid imagination. They may be endlessly curious about life and how things work. They may excel in music or sport or art or making others laugh. This is your child, your wonderful child. So what do they become when they're faced with maths homework? Their difficulty with maths is real, and the causes deserve to be understood. But I want you to know that maths difficulties do not define them. And that's a really important thing to hold on to when the going gets tough. So what can you actually do? Well, in this episode, I hope you've seen that there are so many potential causes of maths struggles. Some of them are related to maths itself and a person's ability to process the magnitude of number. Others are related to other differences in learning, such as dyslexia or dyspraxia. Attentional difficulties can play a part. Struggling to consolidate information and store it effectively in our long-term memory also plays a part. I haven't even talked in this episode about language. So understanding what we hear, being able to express what we understand, either in everyday language or in math-specific terms. And we haven't talked about visual spatial processing. There are so many areas that we'll be exploring in time, but we can't do it all at once. Now, in every episode, I hope to identify a common issue, share some insights about it with you, discuss what they might mean for your child, and then give you a practical suggestion for what you might do to begin to address it, if it resonates for you. So not all of the suggestions will resonate, and that's fine. You only need to choose what works for you and your child. For this episode, I'd like to encourage you to think about the way your child behaves around maths. Now, I'm not apportioning blame here. I really get it. I've been there with my own children. It's easy to default to thinking of the child as the issue. Perhaps they would understand it if they applied themselves more, if they did more homework, if they stopped using their fingers and did it in their head, if they improved their attitude, if they went to bed earlier, if they just learned their blooming tables for once and for all, and so on. Now, if you recognize some of these things in your own approach, I'm asking you to challenge your thinking just a little this week. Think about your child's behaviors around maths as information about what's going on for them. Their behaviors tell us something about what maths is asking them to do and where that load may be too much for their mind at that particular time. We'll take this further in future episodes. And just for now, I want you to reflect on the crunch points. So, is it the maths itself? Is it understanding the magnitude, the size of numbers? Is it that numbers are leaving your child's mind before they can use them? Their working memory. Are they finding it difficult to remember and work through the steps? That's about consolidation and retention, which we'll talk about in the next episode. Now, many children have overlapping difficulties. The picture is often more complex than a single label captures. What matters most isn't the label. It's understanding where your child's difficulties are centered and what's getting in the way. You might explore these aspects that we've discussed today with your child. You might reflect on them together. Moving from my child needs to work harder to which aspects does my child find difficult helps us to focus on the specific steps we can take as we move forward. That shift in thinking is where it starts. Now, this may not feel like a large task, and I really hope it doesn't. Being open to having me alongside your child's mathematical journey shouldn't feel like loads of additional work, but it should do some work. And this work will take time. There isn't a quick fix. Working through slowly but surely is the approach that I'll be taking, and I hope that works for you. You are likely to have a significant job ahead of you. Your child's maths difficulties may have already impacted other aspects of life. I assess adults for maths difficulties too, and I meet adults who have built a story about themselves over time, where they feel that they're not good enough or that they're stupid. I've met people who have excelled in their own fields, but who still don't feel worthy because what they experience in maths has pervaded their broader self-belief. So understanding that changes that for your child, and you have the power to help your child to understand, not all at once, but to change that story. So I want to leave you with one thought. Your child is not bad at maths. They have a difficulty with maths with specific causes. That difficulty is genuine, and crucially, it does not define who they are. I've put together a short companion guide for this episode. It's there to help you hold on to what I've talked about today and to make a little more sense of what you're seeing with your child. You'll find the link in the notes. In the next episode, we're going to look at why maths facts don't seem to stick and why repetition isn't the full answer. Thank you for being here. I'll speak to you next time. If you found this episode helpful, please do share it with another parent who might need it. And if you'd like to make sure you don't miss future episodes, you can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or follow the Safety in Numbers YouTube channel. Until next time, thank you for listening.